So I'm going to show you two different types of games, and they have one similarity. Both of these games have to do with player obsession. This one has been obsessed over for about 25 plus years, and this one was designed for player obsession but only lasted about 11 days before being canceled. Player obsession cannot be designed for. This indie developer sent me their game for feedback, and while I played it, I felt like it wanted me to be obsessed with it, but I never was. So first we'll talk about why that happens, and then we'll talk about ways that maybe we can encourage the player to be obsessed with the game. My name is Devon, this is Games Over Qualia. Let's imagine that you're a gamer in the early 2000s and you have a computer that doesn't really have a bunch of games on it. So you go online and you start looking for Flash games to play, and you find something like Elasto Mania, and you start just playing it, and then you find other friends that are playing it, and then you start to understand that, oh man, there's like different times that I can get, I can beat the level faster and faster, and so you start sinking your time into it. So imagine you're that kind of person there, sinking all your time into that game, and when that happens, you start to understand nuances, and you start to control the physics environment a little bit more and more. And as you do so, you start to stake your claim in the game, and you start to master it, and you start to become someone that is one of these speedrunner type of people. What we're going to be talking about today is Acrobatic Car. So what is Acrobatic Car? This type of game is made for that type of obsession, right? That's how I felt when I played it. My first impressions of the game, I felt as if this game was built for obsession. It was built for people who had those early 2000s kind of time sinks. Acrobatic Car is a game that's made now, and I don't feel that same kind of draw for this game. And this is just my personal opinion, obviously. This is just coming from my own perspective. But when I played a game like Soldier Front was a terrible game. It was like a gambling game too. There was times that you could spend real money in the game, and I hated that. It was crazy. Like I said, it was a terrible game, but I sunk a lot of time into it because it was there. It was the only game that I had to play at the moment, and it was relatively fun, right? The same with Trackmania. Trackmania was free. I played a lot of it, and I ended up trying to, sink a lot of time into there. My time spent gaming now is different. I'm much older than I was back then, and I don't play those types of games anymore. So for me, this type of time sink type of game doesn't really, it doesn't meld well with me. I looked at the history of this game, Acrobatic Car, and I found on SteamDB that there seemed to be about 5 concurrent players at the max of all time. And that kind of weirded me out a little bit, because I imagined that this type of game had such a large community behind it. And there might be, I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure Steam is just one of the places. The reason why I was thinking about this community that's behind it is because, like I said, the game that it's inspired from, Elastomania, they have, large community behind it. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I was thinking, those communities, those people who played those games, they really grew from this kind of organic kind of way, right? Where it was just a game that you spent a lot of time with as a child. And then when you put your time sink into it, then you become a master. And it's something that a lot of people, I think at the time and place, because it was the early 2000s, because there's not a whole lot of other games out, that's what happened. When I played this game, I felt like it required obsession. And that was a little weird to me, to play a game that demands obsession. The first few levels that tutorialize everything are really interesting because they teach you how to exploit the movement, kind of. So, for example, there is a movement in this game where you can use a boost, right? You use your boost to go forward really fast. Now, you can use that boost also to fly. We talked about this on Rocket League. In Rocket League, you're using your rockets to go forward really fast. But some people can use those rockets to do other things, like smash players in the air, or air dribble, as we talked about, where you can fly with the ball at the same time. So you're exploiting kind of these different types of nuances in the movement to do something very specific, very expressive. It seems like this game, it demands that the player know those things, those nuances. Like in the tutorial, there's times where it says, hey, you can use your boost to fly also. Check this out, right? And there's a level where you go straight into a wall, and then you're supposed to use your boost upward and then fly through the area. Then it goes on from there to show another level where you fly, back and forth and back and forth. And it's one of those things that's just really strange to me, because if you were to take a game like Super Smash Brothers and then have have levels where they're dedicated to wave dashing, or if you had levels in, I don't know, Trackmania that's dedicated to doing barrel rolls, those types of things, they're community-driven things. They're community things that build up from the ground because of this organic nature of someone that's getting so invested in the game that they understand all the nuances. And it seems like Acrobatic Car wants us to do that from the get-go. And that really turned me off of the game, just me personally. When I play a game like this, I don't want to have a time sink immediately as I play the game. And it feels like that it's demanding a lot of my time. And that's something that I think about differently than I was when I was a kid. When I was younger in the early 2000s, I would play something like Flash Revolution, and I would easily spend 2 to 4 hours mastering one, not even mastering, just playing over and over and over to see how good I could get, right? Same with a game like Trackmania. I discovered there was a 4th medal in Trackmania when I was younger. They have different types of medals. They have bronze, silver, and gold. And then there's one that's called the author medal. It blew my mind because what that means is that you beat the speed that the person who built the track did. And I ended up doing that for a lot of tracks, but it was something that, again, at the time, I dedicated a lot of time to because I was younger, because it was a different mindset, a different time and place. Clearly in this game, in Acrobatic Car, you are being pushed forward by nuance of control. You are being pushed forward by mastery. We're going to show you a level, you need to beat it that way, and then you progress forward. In Trackmania, it's not that way, right? Now, I'm going to unfairly compare this to Trackmania because I like the way that Trackmania does its level design. And it's fostered this community that's very obsessive. So in Trackmania, you race from the beginning to the end, and that's it. And you're not racing against any computers or anything. It's a single-player experience. The only thing that you're racing against is the ghost of the track, which is just a pre-recorded line that someone else did. So you do that. You race against this other person or this other ghost or whatever, and you try to beat them, and that's it. And then once you do that, then you can go on to the next level. And then the next level, it's not a linear thing. It's kind of like you can just choose whatever. But it's building up this idea that the point of the game is just to get from point A to point B. And if you can beat it in the slowest time that you can, it doesn't matter. As long as you beat the level, you're good, right? Now, in order to unlock other levels, you have to get faster. So that's fine. You can do that. You can beat the bronze level. And if you want to be faster than that, you can try to beat the silver or beat the gold. And like I said, you can even beat the author if you want to. The point here is that we're building up this very, very slow idea of just going forward and beating the level as soon as you can. And you should see the insane amount of people that do these crazy things in Trackmania because of so much nuance of control. And I think how they got to that point was realizing that there's a bunch of physics nuances that they can do within the game in order to go faster and faster. And that's what's really cool about that game. And we talked about this once before with a game called Tangled Crisis, where we were talking about speed and trying to make the player go faster and faster, or trying to push them toward that idea of the nuance of control. When you want a player to go faster and faster, what you do is you just give them, like I said, point A to point B, and then you say, okay, can you do it faster? Can you do it faster than that? Can you do it faster than that? And it's just voluntarily letting the player realize that they can go faster and faster, and that they'll themselves will try to shave off seconds by, trying to exploit the movement, trying to make the movements behave in different ways and stuff. And that's something that they do voluntarily. It's not something that you demand from them. It's not something that you put into a level, not necessarily. I mean, you can, it's a different experience, but that's how Trackmania did it, right? Trackmania was just saying, hey, can you go faster and faster? There are some acrobatic tracks in Trackmania that require the player to do some crazy kind of air stuff. But the stuff that they ask you to do it's so simple at first. They say, here's a 90-degree turn that is different than from all the other tracks that you've been doing, where you go from point A to point B. It's a track that goes straight and then does a 90-degree turn, and that's it. But what that does is it tells the player, oh, there's something different you can do, by the way. It's not necessarily saying, hey, you must do this as fast as possible, but you must get from point A to point B in this weird type of way. So here it is. And then when the player goes, oh, hey, I know how to do that. Let me see if I can do it faster, right? And then they keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And then by that time that you have understood and internalized the level, you have a much bigger understanding of the intricacy involved in your movement. And that is really cool because that's just fostered. That's just something that the player does by themselves and the game itself does not demand. So I really like the way that Trackmania does that, and I think that would help a whole lot in a game like Acrobatic Car. Okay, so I'm going to go into the developer's intentions now. Whenever someone submits a game to me, I ask them questions. So what were you hoping that the player would feel while playing your game? So the first one was nostalgia. And they said they wanted to make the player remember the old fun days of Flash Games era. So there you go. Number 2 was simplicity. They said that they want the player to feel that they play the game and that the game is not playing them by demanding grinding and consuming their time to understand complex systems. We'll talk about that. The next one was challenge. They said that they want to have the player feel a dopamine rush upon completing a hard track. They said neophilia, which to them meant make the player feel that they have played a really new game, new mechanics, new experience, and not the same familiar game formulas repeating over and over like nowadays. And they also said creativity, like the old days when games would have level editors to unleash players' creativity and imagination. I want them to feel creative by making their own tracks via the built-in level editor, which I actually never tried. I did not try the level editor, so I won't be talking about that, but that is a part of it. My second question was, why did you choose this experience as opposed to something else? This person said, I was having fun in my childhood playing the classic game Elasto Mania and many other monster truck flash games, and suddenly these kinds of games that I loved had suddenly disappeared for various reasons. So I always waited for this genre of games to show up again, waited for any developer to make this a similar game, but that never happened. So I decided to make one myself and add modern mechanics and ideas to it. My third question was, were there any specific moments, mechanics, or ideas that you built around that emotional goal? This is my last question. And their answer was, it's all about iterations, dozens of ideas and mechanics that I kept adding and removing and tweaking through the early development process. So the first thing I want to talk about is that first answer that they provided. Clearly, they hit the nostalgia, I think, perfectly. They very much made a game that's very similar to Elastomania. Simplicity, I'm not so sure about the simplicity. It's a physics-based game, so it's approachable for sure. I would say it's definitely approachable. I would not say it's simple. I would say it's very, I'm not sure. It's not really complex, but when you think about the nuances and control and how much how much you really need to know the mechanics going into this game, I would not say it's simple at all. They said that they wanted to have this dopamine rush upon completing a hard track. That was a little weird for me, because for me, I never found a dopamine rush. Now, I would say, there are some people, I'm sure, that will play this game and have that dopamine rush, but I'd say that's very much an individual-based thing. I get a dopamine rush from playing Dead Cells. When I see 9 enemies all attacking me at once, and I'm able to maneuver my way around them and destroy all of them within 10 seconds or something, that gives me a dopamine rush because I know what I'm about to do and I'm doing it, right? I have this intention and it's met with this dopamine rush of me carrying out that intention. I would say that this filled me with relief a whole lot rather than dopamine every time that I completed a level. It was very, very difficult, and once I finally completed the level, I was like, oh, finally, right? I finally did it. It was very much relief and not dopamine for me specifically. Neophilia, that was really interesting. So I would not say this is neophilia. I would say this is definitely nostalgia for sure. I would say that nostalgia and neophilia are kind of conflicting goals. Then I wanted to talk about this second answer that you talked about. Elastomania was very much its own type of deal. Like I said, if you were to come out with Elastomania nowadays, I don't think you would have much success with it. I think it's cool that what you made is that kind of game. I think it's really cool that you have a very specific audience that you're going for. I am all about creating art, right? Creating games for the art. That kind of thing is really cool for me. I really appreciate that. But if you were trying to get a lot of people involved in this, and if you're trying to build a community, if you're trying to do a mass appeal kind of thing, that's different. And for me, it was not a game that I felt drawn to. You have a community and you have a very specific audience that you're going toward, and I love that, and I think more power to you. And I think games like that need to be made. I think that's a really cool thing. This is most likely probably not going to appeal to just everybody, and that's fine. That is what it is. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I will see you guys later. Peace.